studio lights were bright, the cameras were already rolling, and the audience was waiting for the next guest to walk onto the stage. It was supposed to be another entertaining night on television. The host sat comfortably behind his desk, shuffling a few cards in his hands and smiling at the crowd. But that smile carried a hint of arrogance. Tonight's guest was no ordinary athlete. The producers had invited a man whose name was known across the entire world, Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion, Olympic gold medalist, a man who never stayed silent when something felt wrong. As the announcer called his name, the audience erupted into applause. Muhammad Ali stepped onto the stage with his usual calm confidence. He waved politely, smiling as he greeted the crowd. Ali shook the host's hand and took his seat. At first, everything looked normal. The host joked about boxing. He asked Ali about his training. The audience laughed at a few light-hearted comments. But slowly the tone began to change. The host leaned back in his chair and stared at Ali for a moment longer than expected. Then he smirked and said something that made the room feel suddenly colder. "You know, Ali, some people say you talk a little too much." A few nervous laughs echoed in the audience. Ali simply smiled, but the host wasn't finished. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to make the words feel heavier. "Some even say men like you should focus on boxing, instead of trying to lecture everyone." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few people exchanged worried glances. It was clear now this wasn't going to be a friendly interview. The host had decided to challenge Muhammad Ali in front of millions of viewers. For a brief moment, the cameras focused on Ali's face. He didn't look angry. He didn't look nervous. Instead, he looked calm, almost thoughtful. Ali slowly leaned toward the microphone, his eyes locked on the host. The studio fell completely silent. No laughter, no whispers. Everyone could feel that something powerful was about to happen. Because the host thought he had just embarrassed Muhammad Ali on live television. But what he didn't realize was that Ali was about to respond in a way that would leave the entire studio, and everyone watching at home, absolutely speechless. The tension in the studio hadn't disappeared after the host's comment. If anything, it had grown stronger. Muhammad Ali leaned back slightly in his chair, calm and relaxed, as if nothing unusual had happened. The cameras zoomed in, capturing his expression. There was no anger on his face, no sign that the host's words had bothered him. But everyone in the room could feel that the atmosphere had changed. The host cleared his throat and forced a small smile, trying to bring the conversation back to something lighter. "Well, Ali," he said, tapping his cue cards on the desk, "you've always been known for confidence. Some people even call it arrogance." A few people in the audience laughed quietly, unsure whether they were supposed to. Ali simply nodded. Confidence had always been a part of who he was. From the moment he first stepped into a boxing ring, he believed in himself more than anyone else did. He spoke loudly, proudly, and without fear. But the host didn't seem interested in understanding that. Instead, he leaned forward again, resting his elbows on the desk. "You know," he continued, "there are many people who think athletes should just stick to sports. Throw punches in the ring, win a few fights, and entertain the crowd." He paused for a moment and glanced at the audience. "But lately, you've been talking about things like equality, respect, and politics." The room grew quiet again. Some members of the audience shifted in their seats. Others looked toward the stage with curiosity. Everyone could sense where the conversation was heading. The host tilted his head slightly and looked directly at Ali. "Do you really think a boxer should be lecturing the world about serious issues?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ali didn't answer right away. Instead, he folded his hands together and looked around the studio. The bright lights reflected in his eyes as he glanced at the audience, the cameras, and the crew standing behind them. For a moment, he simply observed. This wasn't the first time someone had questioned him like this. Throughout his career, Muhammad Ali had faced critics who didn't like his confidence. Some didn't like his opinions. Others didn't like the fact that he spoke openly about racism and injustice. To them, a boxer was supposed to fight in the ring and remain silent outside of it. But Ali had never believed in silence. The host mistook Ali's quiet moment for hesitation. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled softly. "Maybe it's just easier to talk than it is to explain," he said. A few nervous laughs echoed from the crowd again. But this time, Ali slowly leaned forward toward the microphone. His calm expression hadn't changed, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something focused, something deliberate. He placed one hand gently on the desk and looked straight at the host. The audience leaned in closer, sensing that something important was about to be said, because Muhammad Ali wasn't just a boxer. He was a man who understood the power of words, and in the next few moments, He was about to say something that would make the entire studio realize that the conversation had just taken a very different direction. The silence in the studio was almost unbearable. Every camera was trained on Muhammad Ali, every eye in the audience fixed on him. The host, still trying to maintain control, leaned back in his chair, clearly confident that he had cornered the man. "You talk about respect," the host said, trying to inject a hint of mockery. "But tell me this, do people really listen to what you say, or are you just entertaining them?" A few audience members laughed nervously. Others exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that some of them felt uncomfortable, sensing that the conversation had taken a tense turn. But Ali didn't flinch, he didn't fluster, he didn't even frown. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, placing his elbows lightly on his knees, and looked the host directly in the eyes. There was a calm power in his gaze that seemed to fill the room. He opened his mouth slowly, choosing each word with care. "You think I'm entertaining," Ali said, his voice steady but full of authority. "Let me tell you something. I've never fought for applause. I've never thrown a punch for a laugh. I fight because it's right. I speak because it's necessary. And every time someone tells me I should stay silent, they're not just questioning me. They're questioning every person who's ever been told they don't belong." The audience leaned forward. Whispers ran through the rows. The host's confident smile began to falter. Ali continued, his tone firm but not angry. "You want to know why I speak? Because silence is easy. Courage is hard, and courage, my friend, is what changes the world." The host opened his mouth to interrupt, but Ali raised a hand ever so slightly, just enough to signal that the floor was his. The cameras captured the gesture, the subtlety of it, and every viewer at home felt the tension growing. "You see," Ali said, "I've been judged my whole life. By strangers, by critics, by people who thought they were smarter, richer, stronger, or better than me. And yet here I stand. Not because I'm arrogant, not because I'm loud, but because I know my worth. And I refuse to let anyone diminish it." The audience was completely silent now. Even the host, who had spent years sharpening his wit to control conversations, had no words. He leaned back in his chair, blinking rapidly, trying to regain his composure. But it was too late. The room had shifted. The power dynamic had changed in the blink of an eye. Ali leaned back slightly, giving the audience a moment to absorb his words. "You can mock people. You can try to make them feel small. You can even humiliate them on live television. But no one can take away the truth. No one can erase the value of a human being who stands for what is right. Not even you." The host swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the statement. A few audience members gasped audibly. Some shifted in their seats, suddenly aware of how wrong the host's behavior had been. The nervous laughter had vanished completely. Ali's voice softened slightly, but the power behind it remained. "So before you judge me, before you try to humiliate me, remember this: respect isn't something you give because of fame, money, or power. Respect is something you earn. And once you've been shown the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't unhear it. And you can't take it back." At that moment, the host realized something he hadn't expected. Muhammad Ali wasn't just a boxer. He was a force of nature. A man whose words could silence arrogance, dismantle prejudice, and leave everyone, including the host, speechless. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second, every word, every pause. The audience held their breath, the tension palpable. Ali's calm strength had turned the interview on its head, and in that quiet, commanding moment, the world could see exactly why he was, and would always be, the greatest of all time. No one spoke. No one moved. For the first time in his career, the host understood that he had underestimated not just a boxer, but a man whose courage and dignity could speak louder than any insult. The conflict had been settled, but not with punches, not with anger, only with the quiet, undeniable force of truth. The room stayed silent for a few moments, but it wasn't just an ordinary silence. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your heart beat faster. Every person in the studio, from the camera operators to the crew in the back, could feel it. Muhammad Ali had spoken, and the words were heavy, unavoidable, and undeniable. The host, who had started the interview with a sly smile, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He cleared his throat, tried to adjust his tie, and opened his mouth to regain control. But nothing came out. The confidence he had relied on for years was gone, replaced with a creeping awareness that he had underestimated the man sitting across from him. The audience began to stir quietly. Some whispered to their neighbors. Others fumbled for their phones to capture the moment. A few people's mouths hung slightly open. Everyone knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, a lesson in courage and dignity that no one in the room would forget. Ali leaned back slightly, giving the audience time to absorb his words. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to shout. He didn't even need to glare. His calm composure alone carried the weight of his message. Yet it was impossible to ignore. Every eye in the studio was fixed on him, drawn to his presence, his integrity, his strength. Then, from the back of the audience, an older woman whispered, barely audible, That's Muhammad Ali." A few heads turned in recognition, murmurs spreading like wildfire. The studio was no longer just a television set. It had become a stage where history was quietly unfolding. People realized that this wasn't just an interview. It was a confrontation with arrogance, a lesson in humility, and a reminder that courage doesn't always roar, it often speaks softly, but with absolute clarity. The host shifted again, trying to interject. "Well, so you think speaking out is better than just, focusing on sports?" Ali's gaze didn't waver. His calm voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Speaking out is not a choice for me. It's a responsibility. You think silence protects you, but it only protects the ignorant. The world changes when those who are brave enough to speak the truth refuse to remain silent." A murmur of agreement ran through the audience. Some clapped softly, others were nodding, eyes wide. Phones were being raised, recording every word. Ali's response had not only silenced the host, it had captured the attention of everyone watching, live and at home. The host's hands began to tremble slightly as he tried to recover his composure. Sweat appeared on his forehead. The smugness that had accompanied him into the studio had disappeared completely, replaced with a dawning realization he had misjudged the man in front of him. This was no ordinary athlete. This was a man who could challenge prejudice without raising his voice, a man whose presence alone demanded respect. Ali paused, letting the moment linger. He could see the host's confusion, the audience's astonishment, the silent acknowledgement of his power. He didn't need to attack or belittle, the truth spoke for itself. Then, quietly, Ali leaned in and added one final line, directed not just at the host, but at everyone in the rooms. "Remember this, no one has the right to make you feel small. Your courage, your dignity, and your voice, those are yours alone. Protect them, honor them, and never let anyone diminish them. Not me, not him, not anyone." The room remained still. Even the crew behind the cameras was frozen. Every person who had doubted him, every skeptic who had scoffed at his words, now had no choice but to acknowledge his strength. It was a reaction that no one could have predicted. A reaction that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. Muhammad Ali had done more than answer questions. He had exposed arrogance, educated the audience, and commanded respect with a quiet power that no insult could ever match. And in that moment, the host, the crew, the audience, and everyone watching at home realized Ali was not just a champion in the ring. He was a champion of truth, courage, and integrity. The room remained tense, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. Muhammad Ali's words had done something extraordinary. They had flipped the power in the studio. The host, who had entered the show with arrogance and a smug sense of control, now sat frozen, struggling to process the reality in front of him. For a moment, he looked around at the audience, hoping to find someone who might support him. But the faces staring back were wide-eyed, some shaking their heads, others nodding in silent agreement with Ali's message. The room itself seemed to have shifted. The energy had changed. Ali had exposed something much deeper than a simple insult. He had revealed the true character of everyone in that studio. Ali leaned forward slightly, his calm eyes scanning the room, then fixed on the host. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't yell, he didn't even scowl. He simply spoke, each word deliberate, measured, impossible to ignore. "You think this is a game? You think words are weapons you can wield carelessly. But the truth is, words can also expose you." The audience, previously holding back their reactions, now began to murmur among themselves. Some were recording, capturing every expression, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. It was clear that this moment would be remembered for decades. The host finally attempted to speak, his voice shaking. I didn't mean." Ali raised a hand, stopping him before he could continue. "You didn't mean to show disrespect. Perhaps. But your words, your tone, your arrogance, it says more about you than it does about me. You cannot hide behind your platform to belittle others. You cannot silence the truth simply because it challenges you." There was a pause. The host looked down at the desk, his hands clenched, realizing for the first time that his attempt at dominance had completely failed. Then came the real reveal, not just to the host, but to everyone in the studio. Ali leaned back, his calm, almost imperceptible smile spreading across his face. "You see," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the room, "I've faced bigger challenges than this. I've faced people who told me I didn't belong in the ring, in the world, in history itself. And yet, here I am, standing, speaking, living proof that respect is earned, not granted by fear or power. A few audience members gasped audibly. The host's face, pale now, showed the first hints of shame. His smugness was gone, replaced with a quiet realization. He had underestimated Muhammad Ali, not just as a boxer, but as a man. Ali's eyes softened slightly, scanning the crowd. And to everyone watching, he continued, "This isn't just about me. This is about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. Every person who's been mocked, belittled, or silenced. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to bow. Stand tall. Speak your truth. Let them see your courage. That's how real change happens." The studio erupted, not with laughter, not with applause, but with the stunned acknowledgement of truth. Some clapped hesitantly, then more confidently. Some whispered in awe. The host's attempt to control the narrative had completely backfired. Muhammad Ali had turned a potential humiliation into a masterclass in dignity and power. Then Ali delivered the line that would be remembered forever. "You cannot silence the voice of someone who knows their worth. You cannot intimidate someone who walks with courage, and you cannot teach respect to someone who refuses to see it until it stares them in the face." The audience was now fully engaged. Phones recorded every word. Crew members exchanged glances, realizing they were witnessing something historic. The host sat frozen, speechless, finally understanding the magnitude of what had just happened. Muhammad Ali didn't need to fight. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to prove anything physically. He had exposed arrogance, shattered ignorance, and commanded respect with nothing but words and presence. By the time the cameras cut to a commercial break, the host knew something had changed irreversibly. The audience, the crew, the world watching, it was all a part of Ali's reveal, a demonstration that real power lies not in insults, not in dominance, but in courage, truth, and dignity. In that studio, live on television, Muhammad Ali had done more than answer questions. He had rewritten the rules of respect. And everyone there, and millions watching at home, would never forget the moment he exposed the truth. The cameras were still rolling, but the tension in the studio had shifted into something almost reverent. Muhammad Ali had finished speaking, and his words still hung in the air like a force no one could ignore. The host, who had begun the interview with confidence and a hint of condescension, now sat silently, his hands trembling slightly as he realized the enormity of what had just transpired. For a moment, he tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The rehearsed charm, the quick-witted comebacks, all of it seemed powerless against the quiet authority of Ali's presence. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally muttered, I didn't mean to." Ali's eyes softened, and he raised a hand in a subtle, almost fatherly gesture. "I know," he said. "I know you didn't mean it. But intent is not the same as impact. Your words, your tone, your actions, they carry weight. You may not realize it, but they leave a mark." The audience was silent now, leaning in as if they could feel every word settle into the room. Some of the crew shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that the lesson was bigger than any TV interview, bigger than the host, bigger than themselves. Ali's words were universal, a lesson in humility, dignity, and respect. Then Ali paused, letting the moment sink in. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to demand acknowledgement. The power of his presence was enough. The host finally swallowed and looked at Ali directly, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by genuine remorse. "Sir, I wasn't trying to disrespect you," he said quietly. I thought." Ali smiled faintly, a calm, knowing expression. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "You thought, you assumed, you underestimated, and that's what blinds people to the truth. Respect isn't something you assume. It's something you give before you know who stands before you. And sometimes, the people you think are beneath you turn out to be the ones you should be looking up to." There was a murmur in the audience. Some clapped softly, others nodded, realizing how much humility it takes to admit a mistake, even in front of millions of viewers. The host's face flushed, but there was no anger from Ali, no scolding, just a quiet, undeniable lesson in human dignity. Ali turned slightly, acknowledging the audience with a nod. "And to everyone here, everyone watching at home," he said, "remember this: it's easy to judge when you don't know the full story. It's easy to belittle when you forget that everyone carries their own struggles, their own victories, and their own worth. What you do with that knowledge, that's what defines your character." The host finally bowed his head, understanding that this wasn't about winning an argument or controlling an audience. It was about recognizing when someone had stood their ground with courage, integrity, and truth, he had been humbled, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his own arrogance. Ali didn't linger unnecessarily. He stood gracefully, the same calm confidence that had defined his career in and out of the ring. He shook a few hands quietly, nodded at the crew, and made his way toward the exit. Every step he took seemed measured, purposeful, a silent reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. As he walked off stage, the audience erupted, not with forced applause, but with genuine admiration. Some were cheering, some were wiping tears, and many were still capturing the moment on their phones. The host remained seated, shaken but enlightened, realizing that he had been a participant in a lesson far larger than any television segment could have intended. Ali's words and presence had left a permanent mark. The arrogance of the host had been replaced with humility. The audience had witnessed courage, dignity, and respect in its purest form. And everyone in that studio, crew, audience, host alike, would carry that lesson forward, reminded that true power isn't measured in wealth, influence, or intimidation. It's measured in courage, truth, and the quiet authority of integrity. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Muhammad Ali had exited the studio, but the lesson remained. The impact lingered, and the story of how he exposed arrogance, not with anger but with calm authority, would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. The studio had emptied, the cameras were off, but the weight of what had just happened lingered like a quiet echo. Muhammad Ali's presence was gone, but the lesson he had delivered remained. It was more than an interview. It was a masterclass in courage, dignity, and the power of truth. The host, who had walked into the show with a smug confidence and an intent to control the narrative, now sat alone behind his desk. He stared at the empty stage, replaying every word Ali had spoken. The arrogance that had guided him for years had dissolved, replaced with a profound realization. He had underestimated the man in front of him. He had been shown, in the clearest possible way, that true strength is not measured in insults or condescension, but in courage, integrity, and the quiet authority of self-respect. Muhammad Ali had left the studio without a scene, without theatrics, without shouting. His victory wasn't in dominating the host or silencing the room with anger. It was in showing respect where none had been given, speaking truth where lies or arrogance had attempted to prevail, and holding his dignity above the petty attempts to diminish him. The audience, both in the studio and at home, had witnessed something rare. Not a fight in the ring, not a dramatic confrontation, but a demonstration of true power, a reminder that respect is not earned through fear, intimidation, or wealth. Respect is earned through courage, character, and the ability to remain unshaken in the face of disrespect. Ali had spoken for everyone who had ever been mocked, silenced, or underestimated. Every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, or that their voice didn't matter, could hear his words and feel the weight of their truth. His calm authority, his unwavering presence, and his thoughtful responses had become a model for how to handle conflict, prejudice, and arrogance. And the message was clear: it doesn't matter who you are, what you own, or how powerful you think you are. True respect is universal. It is shown to everyone, especially when no one is watching. It is earned by the strength of one's character, not the size of one's influence. The host would never forget this day. The audience would never forget this day. And the millions of people watching at home would carry this lesson far beyond the television screen. Muhammad Ali had reminded the world that power without respect is empty, and respect without courage is meaningless. As the studio lights dimmed, the moral remained simple but profound: never underestimate anyone. Never dismiss anyone, and never forget that those who walk with integrity and truth have a strength far greater than any insult or attempt to diminish them. So, to everyone watching this story, whether in the studio that day or decades later on video, the lesson is timeless: show respect, speak truth, act with courage, and always honor the dignity of others. One day, the person you look down on may turn out to be the one you look up to. Muhammad Ali didn't just fight in the ring. He fought for justice, for respect, for truth. And in that studio, in that moment, he won again, not with punches, but with integrity and courage. If you believe in the power of humility, respect, and courage, type ALI in the comments. And tell me, where are you watching from? I want to honor every single person who stands for what is right, just like Muhammad Ali did.